Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of By the Numbers. Not only is it number 20, it's the first episode since the major. A little bit of Counter-Strike history in the books. I'm your host, Richard Lewis. Joining me, as he always does, is my co-host, Duncan Thorin Shields, the esports historian. And needless to say, we're going to start by talking about the major. The last episode of the podcast we did probably didn't focus on the major as much as it should. Instead, you got 1 hour and 10 minutes of straight hot fucking fire because people don't seem to know anything about the esports industry and very few people want to tell you the truth about it. But here we are. So look, first of all, Duncan, I'll ask how you're doing and whether or not you enjoyed the major. I think that's a good place to start, right?
Yeah, I thought the major was pretty good. I mean, I will say, I don't know, actually, here's the funny thing. I think it's just because of the way the playoffs in the major started. Because like that Navi Quantum Bellator game was so crap that like somehow in my brain, that combined with like Navi also being pretty crap against FaZe makes me think to myself that like the bracket wasn't that great until the final. But actually, that's not true. Like most of the other series had some good games in them. Like SK Fnatic was fucking sick. Cloud9 SK was closer than people make out. Obviously, FaZe versus Mouse wasn't that bad. I think actually overall it was one of the better majors for sure. And that's before you get to the final, which obviously was sick.
Yeah, I mean, I thought like, you know, you're right. That upper half of the bracket, because you had the QB Fire guys in there, who, by the way, you know, had a opportunity to spend a little bit of time with them once we got to Boston. Really cool guys. Like it sort of cemented in my mind. Like I couldn't be happier for these guys to be successful. Like to give you an idea, like I think one of the best qualities that a person can have is to sort of be self-deprecating from time to time, you know, not take yourself too seriously, right? Like, because I think that gives you a base level for a point of entry for friendship, you know, like if you are successful and you're a bit aloof and a bit arrogant about that success, right? It can be very hard to sort of engage if you don't perceive yourself to be on a similar level, either for intimidation reasons or whatever else. So anyway, when we set up the show match, obviously we needed some players that weren't as good theoretically as Kenny S and Apex, right? For the joke to work.
Yeah. Because
the whole premise was James Bardolph had rigged the show match.
Yeah. And I mean, he had.
Yeah, well, yes, absolutely, of course.
So you fulfilled that premise. Well done.
Yeah. So therefore, we needed two professional players who not only were seen as being worse than Kenny S and Apex, but would also be willing to go along with the joke that they were worse.
Okay.
So you can understand immediately with professional egos how that might be difficult and how what should be a bit of fun for the community could actually take on a weird turn, right?
Yeah.
So when we reached out to those guys and were like, do you want to play in the show match? They were like overjoyed. Like they didn't even, they were like, wait, so the premise is that was shit. Brilliant. What do we have to do? Like they were just like straight into it, you know, Boomich and Jumka. And they obviously played really well in the show match. They you know, so I was like super happy about their success. But to the point, you're absolutely right, unfortunately, that the Navi QB Fire game was pretty bad. And obviously they skewed the overall quality of that side of the bracket horrifically, because there's a knock-on effect for Navi when you've got an unbelievably easy opponent who you just 2-0 without even breaking a sweat, and then your table time, if you want to call it, the time on the server is like an hour and 20 minutes or whatever it was, and then you're home for the day. You haven't had a warm-up, you haven't tested yourself, you haven't tested any theories, you probably haven't even necessarily strategized anything or thrown anything new in there. You just know you can turn up and win, and sometimes that can be an almost deadly mentality for your tournament life, and it wasn't a big surprise for me to see Navi fall a bit flat in the next series as a result.
Like, that's the thing. For that particular match of the playoffs, even if Quantum Bellator Fire gets in, I'd rather they'd be the one who draws like FaZe and just gets smashed, because then who cares, right? You know what's going to happen anyway. What that Navi match needed to be is Navi versus like Mouse Sports or Navi versus Fnatic. Now, that would be a fucking good game, and it would tell you something more about both the teams. Then whoever gets to the semifinals, you know, it feels right. Whereas Navi, obviously, they got the easiest possible matchup, and then as a result, they were easily the weakest of the top four teams, weren't they?
Yeah, and look, again, with I don't want to shit on them. I think it's great everything that's happening to them. All the players have been invited to FPL and everything. I think and they're going to be back at the next major, which by all accounts, if recent reports are to be believed, is going to be run by Faceit. So I'm super happy, like, for everything they've achieved and all of their success and the attention they'll get and the fan base they're going to get as a result of it. But there just is no doubt that, unfortunately, them making it as far as they did when they're not quite ready to compete at that elite level definitely meant there was like one less chance for a classic game, and as we saw, it had the spill-on effect of Navi went past them and were very bad.
Here's what's good, Rich. So when people always make that claim that any team who causes an upset was the better team, and every single fucking upset is never just an upset in isolation. It's always a team who's on some fucking Rudy-esque journey to glory. They brick by brick build up their thing. Well, guess what, guys? You guys all said that they were good because of, by the way, they had some pretty legit wins in the New Legends stage. So then they got to the playoffs. They played what was arguably the worst team in the playoffs themselves, aside from themselves, Navi, probably the weakest team, and they got so utterly shit on that Simple didn't even have to go God mode, and it looked like literally everyone on Navi was fucking smurfing, including the bad players on Navi. So that's what happens when you guys believe in fucking fairy stories. So yeah, it's great that Quantum Bellator Fire were able to do what they did earlier in the tournament, but this is exactly why I once made a video along these lines where I was like, the reason why I hate upsets, it actually has nothing to do with the upset itself. It is the knock-on effect. So, for example, I hate it when you have the fluky best of one at the end of normally a group stage or best of one or whatever. That then means you get the slightly weaker team into the bracket, because then sometimes that fucks the whole bracket up, as it kind of did here. And then secondly, sometimes it just means that you just get robbed a best of three and you have to sit through a whole best of three. Like, fucking hell, it's just too much.
Yeah, and look, like I said, I mean, I guess on the plus side, that disparity in opponents did at least lead to a record kind of being set, with Flamey's first map performance where he got the highest number of kills in a half. I mean, whatever you want to say about QB Fire, obviously, even when you're playing poor opponents, to be able to do something like that is legit, and to do it at a major is legit. So, I mean, something at least memorable comes out of it. I mean, Flamey was, no pun intended, on fire all across that series. But yeah, I think you're right. Unfortunately, that side of the bracket was a little bit kind of tepid. From a personal point of view, like being there and working it, and this is before we talk about the games and the storylines and the final and everything. Obviously, a couple of things I was a little bit disappointed about. We did have a tech delay on the first day due to a networking error, which, again, it's always sort of outside of the tournament organizers' control, but it's also the tournament organizer's responsibility, right? Like, it's always a tough one in that regard. And we had that delay where we had.
It's interesting, that, isn't it, Rich? You remember that Blast Pro Series tournament? Yeah. I
do.
Tell you what, this fucking medicines. Oh, it's gross, isn't it? Why am I? When I made the ingredients to this, I should have fucking put a bit more compassion in here. Would it sort of evened it out a little bit of self,
Here's what I will do, and obviously, I'm not a tournament organizer.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm not on the operations side of it, but I'll definitely go to bat for anybody that for E-League in this. If anybody tries to imply it was anywhere as bad as the fucking Blast was,
still was bad.
I think an hour total delays on day one doesn't really compare to an entire day being cancelled. I think that's a very disingenuous comparison.
We're disingenuous to say entire day. What time did Blast Pro Series start? Because they had three best of ones to be played that day.
By entire day, yeah. I mean the entire first day of scheduled games was cancelled.
Yours was three best of threes in one day. So logically, you could not have started and had an entire day be the same length.
And we played them all. So
yeah, I mean, fucking 3 hours later, I guess if Blast Pro Series just added 3 hours on, they'd be fine as well.
Total delays on day one was like, because obviously I had to time it because I was filling on the desk for it. Total delay was about an hour and 10 minutes behind schedule or something. So
plus you had the worst match in the history of the major ever coming right up afterwards to just catch up some time. So yeah, problem solved.
Worked out real good for us. Yeah, I'm not going to lie about that. Yeah,
the ledger got evened up.
Yeah, it definitely did, and thank fuck. So there was that, and then on the next day, we had a server literally set on fire during that Fnatic.
No, but here's the thing I want to
SK
say about that, though. Like, just as a quick aside, this is why it's so stupid generally for people to make out like, it's like a lack of preparation that causes like issues like this. Here's a classic thing that I always used to say as a very naive person before I knew much about doing events. I always used to say, right, why do these tournaments always have, because you remember, it doesn't happen as much now, but it used to be very, very famous in the 1.6 days that you would just have computers just straight up blue screen of death. Now, I know that doesn't really happen to PCs very often now, unless it's usually like a RAM problem or something, but that used to happen literally, like, not every match, but like, let's say every 3 matches, one person would crash at some point in time. You didn't even have pauses back then at that point in time. Actually, it used to be a complete nightmare. And when it used to happen, I naively, like many people, thought to myself, who the fuck's setting up these PCs? I almost never have blue screen of deaths. Yeah, that's because I play on one PC that's set up that has all, like, guess what? I've like, think about it logically. Yes, I've had blue screens of death. I've then fixed whatever that problem is and kept the exact PC the exact same way. Logically, I've had my blue screens of death. They were at the beginning of having the PC when I was figuring out the software or getting the right drivers that, happen to not, for some weird reason, have a network interrupt with like my fucking LAN card or something bizarre like that. The mix and match element of PCs that you can never account for. Now, obviously, what I had to do is learn that when you put together a tournament, you're using PCs that, yes, you might have tested them once, but you haven't used them 50 times in a row to know they're consistently going to work with that setup. Networking is obviously itself a nightmare if you forget any kind of PC issues. There's so many variables can go wrong. That's why, the best tournaments in the world are going to have delays no matter what. Like, think about it. If we take all delays considered, like, I wonder if there's even been one massive tournament that ever had no delays. One. I don't think if it could have been.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I remember attending one. I've definitely been to one
because I know
event
it's once where it wasn't publicly
no delays, and I think I honestly think I want to say it was the Copenhagen Games.
Okay, but I've never been to an event, for example, that I've worked at on the desk where there wasn't at least one segment that they were like, right, Phil.
Yeah, I mean, dude, it's definitely the norm. This
won't be known by the public because it's a 5-minute fill and they're saying it to machine, like, just fill for 5 minutes. So you guys think we just decided to take 5 minutes extra, but almost every event has that. In fact, usually quite a lot. It's just normally we can cover those ones,
Yeah, I mean, and you're definitely right there. Like, delays are unfortunately the norm in esports, and there's so many working parts to an esport that there isn't to a normal sport, right? Like, as long as the football, the players, and the field is there. Right, and the floodlights are on if it's a certain time of day. That's it, really, isn't it? With the server.
About that sport is that's a perfect example of a sport I think actually does a bad job in that sense. Like they will literally play with the equivalent of if you just had 50 ping lag. Like
fucking Blizzard.
Yeah, they do, don't they? It's mental
all the time. No, I actually love that about football.
Like remember that?
No matter what the weather is, game on. You
remember that game? It was about 10 years ago where the fucking Patriots played the Colts, and it was like just fucking snow and mud everywhere, and like the game was just complete train wreck. It was like garbage football, and that was like I think it was like I don't know if that was a playoff game actually. I'm not sure, but it was like an important match, and they just played it anyway.
I love that shit. Fucking bring that on, man. That's what makes football great. George Carlin agreed. He did a whole bit about football being better than baseball as a result of that. More macho and stuff. But anyway, so
there's no fucking Brazilian players in fucking football, right? The shit they complain about, Richard, that.
We'll get to that, brother. So look, right. So yeah. So delays are on, but I was disappointed. Like, I obviously want every event that we do to be held like to the highest standard, and there was, like I say, about a total hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes of delays across the first 2 days, which were a bit disappointing for me. But I will say I thought we did a pretty good job of keeping the show moving along, having some content there that people could watch. We were actually making content on the fly while, like, I literally having it cut together and rendered while we were showing other content, So
here's the thing, Rich, that's all crap, because the thing is, why are you wasting time filling and talking about stuff? You should have just had them for 1 hour, in-depth breakdown every detail of what was going to happen in the match. That's the only thing that matters on an analysis desk, mate. Why didn't you do that?
All that too, I know. So there was that, but overall, right? Like, I think from an organizational perspective, I think it went pretty well. I think delays were minimal. I think we showed that the talent that was selected for it, there was a lot of people saying, oh, that you need more analysts in there. It's not going to work. Where's Sponge? Whatever the detractors were. And obviously, still good mates with Chad. But we'd already planned to bring the pros in that we brought in at the time we announced the talent roster. It was just that it wasn't finalized. People had schedules that they needed to work out because they were doing other events and there was travel. So it was like, we had nothing on for 1 week. We had Sean Gares, and I thought they did really, really well. But I mean, like, in terms of, Sean Gares, how well he did, he was like some Tony Romo find, right? Like, he was really, really good. There was a couple of days where he was a bit tired and he was worried about being a little bit flat, and I don't think anybody complained about that. But I thought Sean did a good job, and I think it validates what I've been saying all along. The ideal desk would be someone like yourself to bring context, and then an ex-pro, or ideally 2 ex-pros, to bring professional insight and tactics. That, to me, is how every desk should be set up. I don't know if you agree with that.
I mean, I've always said the key word is balance. Like, I mean, this is one of those areas where the topic just gets so muddied, because the people on Reddit, as usual, who are willing to shout the loudest and post the most are the people who have such a niche opinion that they think is the consensus that it becomes a completely it's so skewed discussion. Like, I've said this a million times, there's nobody out there who just wants to see 3 ex-pros break down every round of the game. Nobody does. Like, think about any team sport or discipline that you follow professionally, right? Yeah, you have that segment where the guy does the equivalent of the Ankle Weatherman segment, and you have them show clips that hopefully line up with what the ex-pro and what the analysts are saying during the conversation. But still, half of the discussion during that is stuff like historical context. Oh, was this Tom Brady's best game? Oh, what about this player here? The drama before the game, was he talked shit? Did he live up to it? Why is all that involved? Because that's what people actually want to hear. That's actually what people are interested in. That's what keeps your attention. Now, yeah, it's not all that keeps your attention. You want a bit of each aspect of you, but if you just have one of those kinds of factors and none of the others, it'll actually be just a bad show. Like, I myself probably wouldn't want to watch that show, and I'm generally consider myself quite a purist,
Yeah. I think what was really good, and it was like, I had a very clear idea about where I wanted to take things. So I knew I was going to primarily leverage Janko to be the guy that looked at the maps and did the tactics. I think he's better suited to that, which isn't to say Sean Gares isn't as analytical, if not more so than him. But Sean was a player from NA, and we were in NA doing an NA event, watching an NA team run to the final and win the whole fucking thing. So, and he used to play for that organization. So one of the things I wanted to continually do was kind of get anecdotal stuff from Sean, as well as a little bit of tactical insight. Like, what was it like when, the questions. What was it like when you played against so-and-so? What was it like to play with so-and-so? What about Skadoodle? What's he like as a person? What's he like to play with? What do you think about this concept of the support AWPer? It was more get Sean talking about stuff that would be interesting to the viewer. And it's like I say, I think we did strike a pretty good balance. I'm always conflicted. I feel that 3 is probably the right number for a desk, but if the balance was great and it all worked, you could definitely stretch it to 4 like we did for the final, and I thought that worked too. And it's kind of like tri-casts in that sense, yeah? Like, 2 is optimal unless you have a godlike tri-cast that all understand each other and know where they're going to go and stuff. But like I say, I could see desks in the future being something like that, where they have they have a Sean, maybe a Yanko, maybe or a Moses. So somebody kind of in between, somebody that's like hard analytical, context and comedy, brevity. And then, the more current pro, the newly retired pro. I mean, Sean Gares is still technically a current pro, I guess. So, I thought the desk was pretty good, and everyone seemed to like it. The other big thing was obviously James and DDK got to do their first major final, I should say, which I thought was good. I thought they did a great job. But I mean, then again, they did get an amazing canvas on which...
You know what, Rich? This is by the numbers. It's the realist talk show, so here we go. They shouldn't have had that final. Like, this is the way that it works in esports. This is the way it has always worked in esports. You do not get the finals and you do not get the top gigs based on your talent, because if that was the case, there's people who right now should just jump the whole queue. They should just go right to the top of the list. They should be instantly doing the finals. And here's the thing, 2 factors. One, for other people, I'm not applying this to James and DDK, that would be a bad thing because people's egos would be completely out of control. They would never have to work their way up. And one of the good things about working your way up is you show you're not a massive arsehole on the way up, and people see, right, I can trust this person, right? They know how to deal with problems. They know how to take a good match and then build on it. And then eventually when you put them in the top spot, you're like, right, they totally earned this. Everything's in line. Now there's no risk. And guess what? There is no risk putting those people in the big finals at that point in time. The reason why I say Badenoff and DDK should not have been casting this final is, how many major finals have Sadikist and Henry cast?
I don't know off the top of my head, actually.
I would actually guess 1. I think it's only PGL Krakow, because even E-League Atlanta was still Anders and Semler, even though that was the Henry and Sadikist era, right? They still stole one on going out the back door. So the problem with this is Henry and Sadikist grinded and grinded for years and years and put in their hard yards and never publicly complained, never implied that they should get it, never did what I've actually seen some other casters, I won't name names, do in esports, which is in the green room argue about, I should be doing this match, or even go to the tournament organizer who's hired them. Can I do the final, or can I do this semi-final instead? Never did any of that. Grinded. And everyone was telling them what I'm saying now, which is the dynamic, how the industry worked. You've got to earn your rep. Like, I know you've got the talent now. I know you're ready for the final. But listen, Anders and Semler put in the hard yards before, so they're getting theirs on the back end now. They're getting sort of the victory lap towards the end. And yeah, I know you're better now, but hang in there. You 6 months a year, you'll be doing all the finals, mate. Yeah. So then, what do you know? Their time to do the finals comes along. They do a final. Cool. We're in the groove. No, that's it. The next 2 are going to be Badenoff and DDK. Well, peace. Fuck you. The industry works differently now. So here's the thing. It's actually nothing to do with Badenoff and DDK. They were working their way up. I would have said next year would probably be their time. That's when they could do it. Or, for example, they could have Faceit come along, their organization, who would say, you know what, I'm going to decide you do the final, just as Anders and Semler had a special relationship with E-League that Henry Sadikist didn't. So therefore, they got one that was a kind of, an aberration to that trend that I described before. So this is nothing to do with Badenoff and DDK. They actually did a very good job in the final. Like, I have to say, generally, I wondered how it would work, because obviously they tend to go more jokey style of things, but I noticed they reined it all in, which is like the same approach I take when it's a big match. They didn't make it too much kind of jokes. They kept it on the right side, I thought. So they did a great job, but I do think it's a bit whack that just because everyone's a massive fan of theirs and they're the ones who currently get that like underrated hype, that they just get to skip the line. So I mean, just a side point. That is kind of the point of this podcast, right?
Yeah, no, it is, dude. And listen, I appreciate your fucking earnestness, because obviously it's an opinion that perhaps not a lot of the talent pool would want to express, even if they thought it. Yeah. So like, here's what I say.
Except people actually probably resented me as a result of it.
Well, here's what I say. There is a weird, you're right. There is always a weird hierarchy with casting, right? And that is that you're right. I think at any given moment in time, you can probably identify the hot duo, right? The ones that should be getting the finals. You can tell when, like towards the end with Anders and Semler, love them both, know them both, work with them both. I think you could tell that, some of the stuff that was going on with the duo was leading to the casts not being as good.
Yeah. It's not even that like the other people superseded them. We'll never know. Like, believe it or not, Anders and Semler versus Henry and Sadikist is like some shit where it's like, how would this fighter do against this one from 20 years ago? We'll never know, can we? The peaks didn't line up. And unfortunately, their peaks absolutely did not line up, because by the time that, like 2015, remember, was like when Henry and Sadikist teamed up towards the end of the year. Right, that was literally like 2 or 3 years deep for Anders and Semler. That was like the end of a career. The fact they kept it going for another year, cool, but they definitely was going downhill. I mean, this is one of those areas where if people think I'm biased in my like professional opinions, you're just a clown. Like, Semler's one of my best friends in all of esports. Sadikist is someone who, like, I know him as like an acquaintance and I sort of think we're friendly, but we're not like super close or anything. I only talk to him if I'm at an event. I did videos while Semler was still an active caster in CSGO saying Sadikist is the best and it's his time to be on top now, and basically told Semler as much, like, listen, I know you'd love to do the fancy, it's not your time anymore. Someone has now superseded you and his rep has caught up. So yes, whatever the scenario may be otherwise between us, this is now the opinion that needs to be said. So I've always been fair in that sense, and that, as I say there, Anderson Semler definitely it wasn't working, and part of it definitely stems from the personal relationship, which admittedly is itself a side effect of how long they'd been casting.
I mean, so there's a few things to say here. Like the sad reality is there's only ever going to be one final, right? So your choices are this. You either go through what the system we do now, which is we commit to an idea of there's a zeitgeist at the time, and that zeitgeist dictates who does the final, who does the big show, the big game, and you just commit to that, and then you're going to create disappointment. You're going to create people perhaps feeling resentful of other commentators. You're going to create this weird friction at events. And guys, listen, I'll tell you, it does exist. Everybody wants to do the finals. We've talked about this before, me and Duncan. We have these weird situations where previous tournament organizers have put all the casters in the room and gone, decide amongst yourselves who's doing the final. And it leads to infighting and bickering and weird feeling. And then...
Yeah, keep going.
No, I was just going to say, and we're all supposed to not just have a professional relationship. A lot of us are friends as well. Or I consider it that. And anything that chips away at that, I don't like it. So you either stick to that system where a tournament organizer has to basically make the difficult decision and say who's getting the final, and the other people have to kind of watch on and think, well, maybe that should have been me, maybe it shouldn't have been me. I mean, I've got to say, Henry and Sado, class acts to the end. Like Sadakist especially, he took himself out of the limelight completely on the last day. He knew he wasn't going to be doing the final, so it could have been more important for him to do the show match, right? Well, because he knew me and Henry wanted to do Henry had suggested, why don't we do like a cast together for the show match? Sadakist went, absolutely, Richard, you have that. So he denied himself spotlight. So I could cast with Henry, and that could have gone down terribly. That could have been awful. I haven't done it in years. So mad respect to Sadakist for basically taking himself completely out of the limelight on the last day to basically get a 5-minute death segment or whatever. Really, really grateful for him to allow me to do that. So, so you've got that system, or there's another way of doing it. And no one's done it this way, but maybe you have a dual, you have all the pairings of the casters commentating on a final, and then people can just tune in to whatever they want.
That would be a great system. I think that would be fucking amazing. And the whole point is, I realize, unfortunately, one negative to that, and this shouldn't be a consideration, but because so much of esports is still a gimmick where you just want certain stats to be really good to show someone in a press release, unfortunately, people are obsessed with highest views on a single Twitch stream, which shouldn't work. It should be the total cumulative of viewers. It shouldn't matter that what one stream got. That is not indicative. So I agree. I think the ideal scenario actually would be some sort of situation where you had the two main duos do the final, and then people pick between, and then it doesn't really matter which it doesn't even matter if one's more successful, whatever. You add the two together, and in fact, let's be logical, you would all get more viewers. I'm going to go ahead and say it. You'd get more viewers. You'd get some people, I don't think people just only watch for the casters, but some people would stay longer who are casual, who just happen to vibe with that flavor, It would just be a cool way to do it. And actually, that ties into a point I want to make as well, which is that one of the reasons I always speak up about this topic is because, unfortunately, it is those personal relationships that the casters have with each other that mean they can't have this discussion in good faith publicly or privately often. And so when you have these scenarios that you were describing there in green rooms where tournament organizers basically openly talk with the casters about who's going to do games, I'll tell you another thing that came out of that a couple of years ago was because you had all these good casters, this notion started to be employed by the tournaments where they were going to be it has to be fair. And it was basically literally the equivalent of what the social justice warriors have wanted, equality of outcome, not equality of opportunity. And so what they did is they literally made it so that they assigned people to games before they knew what game it was. So that meant, right, that sometimes you'd have casters like Moses would be casting a game from some obscure Eastern European team he's never watched. Meanwhile, someone who might have done an online league that had that team in it wasn't doing that game. They were doing a massive game that Moses would have been way better suited to do, just because arbitrarily they'd been given that game. And the tournament organisers literally were claiming that it's fair to do this because then no one knows what the games are. Therefore, we get an even distribution of matches.
Yeah,
now again, that makes no sense. Well. You don't go, you know what, for the Super Bowl and the NFL playoffs, we're just going to randomly assign who does the games, and we're not going to do it based on whose like skill set would fit that or who's the big show and the marquee names. Let's fuck all notions of show business and how that operates and just give it evenly out to everyone. You know, it wouldn't make any sense. So I'm glad we actually got past that. That's one of the things we had to actually go through, unfortunately, because all the casters who wants to be the guy who speaks up there? You sound like an asshole, don't you? So in that scenario, first of all, I am an asshole, and secondly, I wasn't a caster, so I could actually kind of like I could sow some of the dissent there to get rid of that shit. Thankfully,
I mean, so you've got this. Like I said, this is the problem. This is the issue with having as much talent as we do, and as much good talent as we do. You know, there's so many commentators that all can bring something to a final, you know, and there can only be two people. And it's also not the done thing to swap casters once a series begins. So even in these like really long best of 5 finals that finish 3-2, and the casters are doing 6+ hours of commentary and might be exhausted as a result. We still say, oh no, he who starts the cast ends the cast. It's a very weird rule. I've always thought maybe tagging people in for maps could be something we could do as well. But it is a shame, because I agree with you. I think Henry G and Sadikis the straight fire. I think all the guys are. I think they've all got a very different style. Like I love Anders and Moses is more like a dry style, but like Anders is still a fucking straight fire hype guy when he wants to be. And there's a reason why he's in the fucking Turner Sports tees now for all Turner Sports shows, screaming, and Australia's won a championship in his fucking ridiculous voice. And then you've got like James and DDK, who fucking, I think they feed off a crowd like no other commentary duo we've got. So in a live setting, those guys are great. You know, a lot of people make the mistake of judging them on some of the online casting they do when they've been fucking, done 8 hours of European games, had a 2-hour nap, and then I've got to do like fucking 4 hours of American games. And they obviously have to marshal their energy reserves. I've done that. I've done a 12-hour day commentating on every game that comes, and it's fucking hard. So I don't know, man. I think all things told, I think Henry and Sada will be all right. I think they'll do a fuck ton of finals this year. I think James and DDK will as well. And I think everything worked out all right in the end. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to sort of bring up, from the major that I thought was pretty good. I liked the crowd. Thought there's been a lot of the NA crowd stuff was getting thrown around.
You liked the crowd, did you?
I actually did.
You like people shouting in Portuguese window when someone's going through a window in a clutch? You like that, do you?
Here's the thing with that.
Do you like that, Rich?
I had and Americans supposedly did it too, but they were in a minority.
Anyone who does it's a rat.
Yeah. Okay. We sent somebody over to remove a sign where someone was holding up A and B. We fixed that issue, which by the way is fucking really bad.
You know what, by the way, I realize, like, I'm not saying this to go super harsh on the guy, but obviously this is a topic that Freakazoid actually brought up today on Twitter, where he was saying that anyone should be allowed to shout what they want. Go and look at sports, bro. Okay, here's 2 sports to go and have a quick look up on. Go and look at tennis when people are serving, and now go and look at snooker while someone's about to hit the ball. Go and tell me that you can sit in the crowd and shout, "Oi, dickhead! Oi, you're going to fucking miss that!" And then he's supposed to just be, focused and a warrior. No, mate, you get thrown out the fucking stadium the second you do that. Guess what? They are sports which require silence. Now, Counter-Strike doesn't require silence. You can definitely say things, but why would it be a carte blanche to say anything you want? You can't cheat. That would obviously be absolutely unacceptable. Now, I agree, unlike those sports where, because it's just silence or shouting, which tends to be the breakup in most sports, I agree it's very difficult to police. Like you can't have like famously, okay, the Australian Open in tennis is the harshest for if you shout, as in they actually have guys who sit there, and if someone shouts, they like look who it is, and I think they even have a system where fans point at whoever did it, and basically they'll just throw you out on your ass if you do that, because you could ruin the whole game if you do it. Now you couldn't do that in Counter-Strike, because again, how could you differentiate between the noise of who shouted and who did it, and how could you tell? That'd be too hard, I agree, but there has to be some sort of fix to examples like this, because this tournament in particular, there were some egregious examples of like, even if the player didn't hear it, it's like that's such a judgment call, and it definitely could have affected what they did in the match, you know.
Yeah, so look, I think a lot of the outrage that I saw on Reddit is based on a very fallacious premise to begin with. And that premise assumes that what I hear on a stream, even including crowd noise, is what a player can hear in the stadium. And it's not true at all. The same people that are saying, oh, look, they can hear things, are complaining about, for example, the in-game noise not being synced up or whatever. Sometimes what you hear on a stream definitely isn't what players hear. And there was a video that I saw on the front page of Reddit, and it was very quickly debunked, thankfully. And it was of the Stewie 2K one where he looks back up at window and somebody said that they'd shouted window, but actually what had happened was I think it was Guardian. Somebody had jumped and made a sound cue.
Okay.
And that hadn't been picked up on the time. It just happened to sync up with someone shouting. No, I agree with you. I wish fans wouldn't do it. We addressed it in the stadium, if I remember rightly. I think somebody said over the speaker, like our alternative host, the Golden Boy, because it was two. I think he said at some point, please respect the game, respect the rules. I know we do.
Well, they actually used to do that at E-League. I remember the person who's the studio manager used to tell the crowd before it went live every single time. I remember it because it would always be what she'd do while we were about to go live. She would just tell them all, you can shout, yeah, we want that, but just do not ever give them information that violates the competitive integrity, basically. Yeah,
and this is something we've always done at E-League, so anybody who comes to an E-League taping, which I hope some of you will do at some point, this is what you'll experience. You'll sit down, and about 15 minutes before we go live, our floor manager will come out and address general housekeeping rules, one of which is do not shout out any information, because even though we're using white noise and the big soundproofing earphones, bless you, They still do not want you to do anything that could alert people, as to where they might be and influence the outcome of the game. Now, that's routine. We do that every time. Trying to do it with a stadium crowd is obviously a little bit more complex, but I agree with you entirely. I think if you're the kind of person who goes to a game, like that kid who was holding up the sign A or B, even if he's doing it for a fucking joke, I was fucking livid. I was of the mind, throw that guy out.
It is a thing. That's not even a good excuse. By the way, if we're not allowed to make jokes about any other topic and have people go, but I interpreted it seriously, well, then we can't do that, can you? There we go. You have to hold everyone to the standard.
And I think holding up the sign is far worse, because there's not even a booth would necessarily fix that problem. Like if a player sees it, and also as well, there's an implication there, isn't there? If you're doing that, well, we don't know. Are you friends with the player?
Exactly. Yeah, you can't know.
Did the player tell you to do it? So you open up this disgusting set of implications for the pros that you supposedly respect. So if you go to a fucking event and you're holding up a sign saying A or B, which has happened at DreamHacks, happened at this one, although thankfully due to somebody messaging me on Twitter, we got that real quick. If you do that, you are a fucking piece of shit. You've got no place coming to live events, in my opinion. It is like the one thing that, more than shouting where somebody is, has a real dark implication involved in it. Now, to the other point about booths, which comes up every time somebody thinks, typically when SK Gaming play, and there's a variety of reasons for that. I'm not saying that some players don't bring it on themselves by giving the appearance that they're trying to gain an advantage by lifting an ear off. But also as well, I will say this in the interests of balance, because they've been so successful, there are a lot of salty bitch fans out there who would just happily assume.
Oh, by the way, one thing that
Brazilian fans are all cheaters,
Yeah, one thing that absolutely disgusts me is like, this is one of the reasons why I made that point not so long ago. I think it was like a week and a half ago, about how utterly outrageous it is, the fucking moderation on HLTV.org. Like, at this point in time, if they are truly attempting to moderate that forum, shut the forum down if you have any moral compass, because all your users are racists, apparently. Like, either you're not moderating it correctly, because I've been on many websites that had more people than that. Put it this way, fucking 4chan has less like racism per comment than a fucking HLTV thread. And it's unbelievable. Some of them are up for hours as well, Rich, on the front page. Like, what massive website like that sold for millions of dollars? What, and you can't have someone around all the time? Remember, you claim to have people all around the world who watch your website, not just a million people in India. So if you have people all around the world, what, you can't have a shift system where someone goes, right, obviously I can't check every forum thread, but if one goes on the fucking front page that's like, this team, racial epithet, it doesn't stay up for half an hour. No, that doesn't happen on your front page of your website, which then inexplicably you can't get any real sponsors for that aren't a complete fucking train wreck and probably illegal businesses. So what I will say is that website not only is like a disgrace for general stuff, but the amount of racism that is constantly leveled at SK players and the amount of terrible threads about SK players, even beyond the racism, just constantly, like, everything's just abuse of those guys. It's fucking unreal. It's one thing to say you think they're shit or they complain or whatever, but this is just abuse at this point in time. Like, it's just, I realize it's not entirely unprovoked. Like, yes, those are like, they think they're like counter fans arguing against, yes, the utterly unacceptable moron SK fans who do just as bad the other direction. But just because someone does something fucked up doesn't justify you doing it. And I have to say, they get more hate from the, obviously not from for the non-SK fans. No one gets more abuse than SK does.
Yeah, no, it's really disgusting, and you know, we've sat here and talked about the persecution complex that they seem to have. Well, I got to be honest, if I went on the internet and all I ever saw was fucking racist abuse aimed at me, I'd probably have a bit of a persecution complex too. I would very quickly get into a, you know, entrenched mentality. So I definitely empathize.
Oh, I've told you, Rich, that actually happened to me. Where what happened was, because I only saw comments from Brazilian fans that were directed to me, I literally thought, well, I mean, obviously, if I'd have ever sat down and had to calculate, I would have never been like, 90% of them all hate me. But that's all I saw all day long. So as a result, I told you, one of the things that actually changed my view on fans in that way was the incident I had with Luminosity, where when I talked to Luminosity players, they said to me, you don't understand. Those same fans who say that to you, if I have a bad game, might say something similar to me.
Yeah. So actually, I remember that. Yeah.
It's not that they're like my fan and I'm turning them on you or something or like that. And when they said that, it actually did turn on a switch in my brain. And ever since, I have never associated them with the actions of their fans.
Yeah, and look, you know, again, I'll say it. Like, I think I definitely sympathize, because they're in the rock and the hard place. The same people they need to almost, you know, not pander to, but respect, because it's their fan base. There's a fucking small but very vocal and vicious minority among them that they don't give a fuck. When they're winning, they'll cheer them and they'll identify as an SK fan and a Brazilian CS fan. But the minute that they lose, the minute, you know, let's say this new team doesn't go well, let's say they move to MIBR like it's being touted, and it doesn't work out for some reason, like inexplicably they just fall off a cliff. The level of abuse those guys are going to get from what is ostensibly their own fan base is terrifying to me. It is horrific. So I definitely sympathize with that. So I do not buy into this mythology that, you know, oh, the few SK Gaming fans that were in Boston were all cheating and trying to give them information.
Oh, of course not,
now we did hear some shouting some things, but I don't even think the Brazilian players heard those things, and I'll get into why in just a second. But to your point about HLTV, I just wanted to give you a little cul-de-sac anecdote like we do on here. Well, okay. A bunch of them really. So I've been in that position where the thread that really shouldn't stay up has stayed up for a while. So at the height of the HLTV Cadred/Heaven Media rivalry. And look, that's all put to bed now. HLTV won out. They are the leading CSGO coverage website. Grateful for all the work they do in the community. I think it's a shame Nomad is still a fucking tool. I wish you would just dial it down a little bit. Like, just, you know, we all mellow with age, most of us. You know, he just doesn't seem to have, and is still holding on to beefs from like 8 fucking years ago or whatever it is. And it just doesn't make sense to me, because maybe if he was a bit more open to input from people. Like, he's so defensive. Like, people say, oh, why are you having to take those gambling sponsorships? For example, why are you having to take those to monetize what is the most successful CSGO website in the world with what you say is millions of users and millions of unique impressions every day? Maybe somebody could help you with monetizing that project. And he goes, well, how would you know better than me? And it's like, well, all right, I guess that conversation's dead in the water. Like, he thinks input and suggestions are a failure. Like an implication of his failure, rather. So they used to fucking absolutely hammer at me. So there was 3 occasions where it was just like out and out propaganda that went out. So there was one where a photographer, and again, this is all in the past now, but he was at a Heaven Media event where I'd been, I was there reporting on it and doing interviews with the players and stuff like that. But we were a bit short-handed, and I had to get up and build the fucking stage. I actually had to get my hands dirty with the event. And because of that, I wasn't in the press room. And I'd been out drinking the night before, but, just like 1-2 beers after. Yeah, 1-2 beers after. So the photographer made like a Facebook post. I can't remember if it was on his page, but I think it was on the HLTV Facebook page or something, saying Richard Lewis was out drinking last night and once again didn't turn up to event because he was chronically hungover. And I think the only other one was when Lurpus had said, I missed the last day of ESWC, which I did because I was hungover. But actually, I even missed my flight home and everything. I had like tonsillitis, and I just got so sick. And again, obviously, alcohol consumption doesn't help when you're ill, right? So anyway, and again, no beef with Lurpus now, even if he did say he wanted me to die of a heart attack. It's all in the past. We're all mates now. So anyway, this guy basically put out that I hadn't turned up to work because I was hungover. And I was jerry-rigging a fucking stage, like with a spanner and wrench at the time. And someone came over and mentioned it, and I went fucking spare, as you can imagine. I was like, why don't we take that down? And he was going, I'm not going to take that down. I'm like, well, you're at our event. You've got a fucking press pass. Take it down, And our boss come over and said, it's not fair that you disparage our staff like that. And they just held firm on it. And I think in the end, he did remove it, but it was up for hours and people were like linking to it and stuff. So then there was another time where we were having it was when we did Mad Catz Vienna, and famously HLTV weren't there. And they reported that they weren't there because Cadred, a rival owned by Heaven Media, who were running the event, didn't want HLTV there so we could control all the content. Well, the reality was the press room was about half the size of this bedroom. It literally had 2 desks in it. And they didn't apply for a press pass. They thought we'd ask them to come. And we were just like...
Which says a lot, by the way, about the way that website's run.
It was just like, this is fucking first come, first served. And a bunch of local Czech press had applied. And it was like, well, what do we do? Do we tell these guys to fuck off so we can make way for the almighty HLTV? That's not fair, is it? So... Anyway, they posted up saying that we had done literally on the fucking page. Sam, Google Mad Catz Vienna HLTV.
It'll be there.
Not
I think it was like February. It was in February 2013. So
yeah,
just go back on the
2013.
archives and you'll find it.
Yeah, you'll find it, Sam, and then just bring it up on screen when you do. They literally put a post up saying that we had refused to invite them and refused to accept any, refused to give them a press pass, which they didn't formally request. Because we wanted to control the fucking information and not have them there, and they were right. It just wasn't like that at all. Actually, the event was way more beneficial in terms of the money it was generating for the business than Cadred was. So it was obviously more beneficial for as much coverage as possible. But in the end, they created a conspiracy theory and just published those lies on the front page, and it's still there to this day. Like that happened, and I was somehow involved and implicated, as if the guy that stood up for fucking freedom of the press in the esports space would ever be privy or party to something like that over what was, fucking stupid internet beef over which video game was better, right? So then the third thing, and this was like where I really was like, this guy. HLTV, why are you doing this? There was a forum thread made while I was at another event. It might have been coming back from Mad Catz, or it might have been another one. And the HLTV staff who were cool with me will probably remember this. A user had posted on HLTV saying, "I have evidence Richard Lewis is a pedophile, and I will release the evidence here in 2 hours." Right? And I'm just looking at that thread like, really? is that real? And other threads were like coming up and being deleted. So moderators were active on the site, right? You know? And I said, I like messaged them and got in touch going, come on, guys, like whatever the fuck is going on with us, can you remove that? And they were going, no, there's no moderators available to remove it at the moment. Like, well, what are you doing? Who are you? You don't have access, do you not? And they were like, nah, busy at the moment. And it stayed up there for those 2 hours. Just on the off chance somebody had something that incriminated me. And of course, obviously they don't, because I'm not a pedophile. But they just let it stay there, just in case. So, yeah, I've had my run-ins, like, you know. I would say they're a very strange website, but fortunately, I think they've matured a little bit almost across the board and brought in, some good new staff that when they come to events, they're great to work with, super respectful. And I'm glad it went that way, because if it was the HLTV that it used to be in terms of how they interacted with the people who were running events, it was real fucking tough.
I haven't seen any of that myself personally. My experience has been that to this day, all the people who literally joined HLTV 1 or 2 years ago, who have nothing to do with any of these beefs we're talking about, do that stupid thing where they're like, oh, tribalism's great. I'm part of the beef as well. I'll tweet insults at you. It's like, I'm not even talking to you. What are you talking about? People like that just never learn, will they? There'll always be people in the esports industry who, like, it's like, oh, I'm just on the way up. Let me just insult everyone above me and see how it goes.
So, this bit about soundproofing is actually going to answer one of the $100 questions from our $100 patrons. Matasius wanted to know about this very issue, so we'll address that now. As I said, I know enough about the game to know that when crowds cheer something, even if the crowd, the entirety of the time, were calling out where people were, and we couldn't stop it and we couldn't do anything about it, it would only get through to the players an incredibly tiny fraction of the time, because of the way the soundproofing works with the white noise and the soundproof headsets, and the fact that they're on a TeamSpeak with comms coming through, and the fact that there's an admin behind them listening. So obviously, if the crowd are going B, and then the admin's here and the player turns around and goes, I fucking think it's B me, like, you know, they're probably gonna have something to say about it. The game's probably gonna get stopped. None of that happens. Generally, the players are too focused on what's going on at the time to really even be thinking about the crowd. Now, I'm not saying never in the history of Counter-Strike has a crowd given away a position or a clutch at a crucial moment. I've definitely seen it happen with my own eyes. I've seen casters do it at events. Again, ESWC and Land 79 from Source immediately spring to mind. I remember the finals where I think it was the Imperial, which was Fetish's old team, were taking on Berry Games in France on home soil, and somebody was spamming through a fucking box and absolutely peppering a Danish guy, and they couldn't have known he was there. And the commentator was going, wee, like fucking the pig that ran all the way home, you know? And obviously the player kept spamming as a result of that. And one of the things that I loved about Fetish was when he was doing the runners-up interview, he said, why do you think you lost today? Why were Very Games better? And he goes, well, I think the fucking commentators helped him a little bit, didn't they? And the interview was going, no, but Very Games were just better, weren't they? And he went, nah, fuck off. Like, on a stage to a French crowd. That's why Fetish is one of the biggest ballers in the fucking game, you know? But honestly, I think this booth issue is really overplayed. First of all, from a physics perspective, which I know nothing about, I'm definitely not a scientist, but I've been told with good authority by people who do profess to know about physics, the concept of a soundproof booth is actually impossible. You would need to have it suspended in air and all of this other crazy shit. I do remember, actually, didn't they do a fucking StarCraft event where motherfuckers had to climb up a ladder into, like, these booths that were suspended in the air? I'm pretty sure that did happen. Look, I may have been tripping balls. I mean,
funnily enough, I can even I'll just give you an example of how I know that what you say is accurate, where you need level of suspension, because that's literally what I did to improve my mic setup. I got something that's called like a suspension cage, where basically it's sort of hanging inside, but it's not touching any metal. It's got like pieces of sort of like elastic that bend round and hold the mic. So essentially it's only being held up on sort of like a wire, basically. But because it's not touching the arm that the mic's in, and then as a result of not touching the arm, nothing can travel up the table into their arm, into the mic, you can't get any background vibration. But otherwise, you'll always have a level of back. It wasn't until I put the mic in, this suspension thing, that I found out that it's called a shock thing, actually. Yeah. But yeah, shock mount. But it wasn't until I actually did that I realized, even when I thought my mic was actually like really good, there was still actually a tiny little bit of background vibration, no matter what. You just didn't notice because that's just always there. So yeah, I think that is probably unreasonable unless you're literally playing for like $1 billion to have somehow an entire desk and all the PCs suspended in the air but not touching the ground anywhere. That's probably unreasonable.
Yeah, and obviously people remember as well, it's not just CS where we have this constant back and forth. You remember at Katowice in 2014, Naniwa got up in the middle of a fucking series and walked out because he said that somebody had the crowd had given away what was going on, but Polt, who was his opponent at the time, said he had no idea that.
No, that's not accurate. Actually, what happened was, I believe after the fact that I can't tell if it was actually like after Naniwa left the stage, but I think like Polt or another player told Naniwa, like, yeah, I could hear some stuff, but they never said they heard the exact thing though. That's the difference, right? I don't think they copped to the fact that they'd heard like, the exact moment that he was trying to do this fucking all in. But I do believe someone, it was either Polt or like, maybe this is just because Naniwa told me, but it's privately, but I believe one of them did imply like, well, I could hear something. And then he did obviously take that and go nuts with it. Like, I agree, probably went way too far, but it wasn't as like, that was just Carmack who was like, no, actually, no. Because here's the thing. I'll tell you right now why, Richard, why you're probably remembering that it wasn't the case. What Carmack did at the time was a classic, I would say, dirty tactic, which is what he said, Richard. He never said no players could hear anything. He said no players complained to us that they could hear anything. Now, do you see the very key difference there and why Carmack would be very good as the press officer for a Republican president? Insert any of them. What's hilarious, Richard? They're all going to think, I mean, Trump. Just insert any of them, mate. Just insert any of them.
So, yeah, no, well, the way I remembered it was, and again, like, obviously it's fucking years ago. My brain's had a battering since then. But the way I remembered it was that, yes, the crowd had made a noise, but actually, if you watch the game back, Polt had a good read on an attempt. It was like a standard.
It was a very questionable case. Like, I wouldn't go down on either side of it. And I know Nanawa personally, and I literally know his side of it. So I would say, put it this way, I would say in that one, he might have overreacted.
Yeah. And I thought that, like, it was just it wasn't that he had a read on what he was doing. He did actually scout and see what he was doing. Yes. So he sent out a unit and saw it. So in that sense, there's no real way to prove it unless there is, which I think couldn't find. I was
blind luck and maybe he heard something, But like I don't think it was that. It wasn't clear cut put away. Although, by the way, that is obviously a game where it sound like that would be the most crippling because, for example, in that particular sense, where Nanawa's a Protoss player and Protoss has tons of all-ins and early cheeses, you cannot have the crowd letting the opponent know. And the problem in that sense ties back into what you said about booths, is that in a game of StarCraft, nothing happens for the first 5 minutes. Even if you scout, it's just one unit. The crowd doesn't cheer when you scout the opponent's base. They only cheer if you're building the fucking gateway to come and rush into his base when you're just off in the fog of war. So unfortunately, that is an example of a game where it's going to be the most detrimental if they hear anything. Like, if they don't even have to hear someone shouting scout, they just have to hear a lot of the crowd shouting and they know, right, something's fucking going down.
And just as a final point on booths, apart from being potentially ineffective, and nothing's going to change the visual cues because they're obviously glass. You can't have them sealed off, so you can't see the players. That defeats the object. I think they're very restrictive in terms of like fan interaction, atmosphere, and hype. I don't really like them in that sense. They're an extra logistical concern at an event, and I've been in some very good booths. Like the ones at Gfinity are fucking great. I'm told the ones that Valve have for Dota tournaments are fucking great. But honestly, I don't know if it's a good fit for a game like Counter-Strike. You might get the odd incident where there's a presumption that somebody has given away some information. But I think they're so few and far between that we don't need to necessarily change the game as it is now. That's my opinion. I don't know if you agree or disagree.
Well, first of all, Like, this is one of those areas where you can't ever have a real discussion in esports. Everyone's a fucking pleb. Like, everyone in esports, even people experts, I'll call him out right now, Sadikist. So Sadikist came out on Twitter saying that,
I've burning all the bridges tonight.
I've been inside. I've been in every booth I've been inside. You can still hear people. How many booths have you been in, mate? How many booths have you been in? I bet you haven't even been in 5 booths in your entire life. If you have been in 5 booths, you haven't been in the ones in Korea. You haven't been in the Dota 2 international booths. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So you're coming forwards as someone who seemingly is a knowledgeable person, because fans are going to think, fuck, he's been to a lot of events. I bet he's been in all the setups. I don't know that you have, and I'd go ahead and say that you're not an expert on it regardless. So actually, I don't think it helps, because what's the purpose of you making that comment? It's not really just to say your opinion. You're obviously on the side that you don't want booths and you don't think they're necessary. So I don't really think it's reasonable to present yourself as a fucking expert when you're not in that scenario. So there's only 2 groups of people for some reason. We must have booths. They perfectly block out sound. No, we don't need booths because they can't block out sound. You know, any person who knows about booths would never come down on either of those sides.
No.
It'd be outrageous, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So my question would be this, Rich. I can't even answer the question, should we have booths? Because that's like saying, should you buy a Lamborghini? Well, I'll tell you what, Lamborghini's way better than a Ford Fiesta, mate. Depends how much money you've got, though. Depends what you need to do with the car. Depends if you want to go on a fucking racing track with it, or if you want to drop the kids off. Now, a Lamborghini is objectively a much better car than a Ford Fiesta, but not if certain circumstances mean that a Ford Fiesta makes a lot more sense for you. So in this setting, I would ask questions like this. Are we going to keep this booth permanently beyond the event? Are we going to have events again and again in the same arena? If we do factors like that, yes, I think we probably should have a booth, and we probably should have one of the best ones, and we should pay the money it takes to get it perfectly soundproof. If it's going to be a one-off event, and if it's going to be an event where, as you say, the game isn't necessarily one that dictates as much, there's all sorts of reasons why you wouldn't have a booth and why that logistically wouldn't matter. And I'd even tie that back in to the whole thing we said last week, so go back and watch it again, about people thinking tournament organisers are making tons of money. They aren't. So these tournament organisers are already absolutely worked to the bone. They've got fucking players telling them, just extend the event one day longer. Don't you dare fucking take the prize money down, and I better get everything that I want. But just extend the event one day longer for the exact same amount of games, and just fuck your bottom line and margins, right? So event organisers are getting it from every side. So I definitely have a lot of compassion towards them. So it depends really what the setting is. Like in this setting, I could make an argument for booths, which would go like this, Rich. Same with the international one. For the World Championship of Counter-Strike, yeah, I might go ahead and say, let's have a permanent location that it's held in so that we can control every environment and we have no problems. I could see a world in which that's pretty cool. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, look, so out of all the tournament organisers I've talked to down the years about booths, and obviously this issue comes up, it's a once-a-year esports issue minimum, usually 2 or 3 times, honestly. They all say the same thing pretty much. They say that the best reason to have a booth isn't to preserve the integrity of the game, but to silence the community's accusations that the integrity wasn't preserved. I think that's quite telling in and of itself. That the ones who, whether they have them or they don't have them, what they all agree is that at least it stops the community from accusing you of this, like, and I think, I don't know, I don't think that's a good enough reason to spend money and get, do whatever you have to do, get licenses. I see a lot of people online talking about, it's a fire hazard in the US. I have no idea if that's true or not. Never even looked into that, honestly. But it is something that gets brought up a lot about fire codes. I can't imagine that being true, but maybe it is. But yeah, for me, I think it's really overplayed. I think it's a really overplayed issue. And, perhaps the fans could take a little bit of responsibility and, not be cunts and not shout stuff out.
Yeah.
Just a thought. Right. Anyway, let's pick up the pace. So let's talk about the final. Let's just jump straight to there. Obviously, I'll be honest here, Duncan, and I can tell you spitting straight hot fire tonight and ready to burn bridges. So let's not burn ours. Let's be friends.
What does that mean?
Well, I'm just gonna say something you might not like.
Come on, it's gonna be something stupid then. Come on. Are you ready? You're gonna say something so outrageous that if I applied the standard to you, you'd lose your shit. So go on.
No, I'm not. Just take the deep breaths.
You're gonna say good final, wasn't it? Go on.
No, I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna say that it is amazing that the final turned out to be as good as it is, but it did make me laugh a little bit. The tweet you did. That's it.
What made you laugh?
Well, like you said, you thought, like, just coincidentally, it was a fair assessment that it might be a one-sided final. That's what I thought going in. My prediction was 2-0 Fays, comfortable wins, 16-8, 16-9. I even told Jack that to his face the night before. But I did have a chuckle. Sorry. There. That's it.
I don't understand what the concept is.
Because the final turned out to be the best final of all time at a major.
It's hilarious that you can't see the future, and that's something that never happened before happened. Why didn't you know that had happened, dickhead? It never happened before.
that was
you got me rich. Guess what? If I die tomorrow, have a proper laugh at me getting stabbed to death, mate, because I couldn't see it. I even told my girlfriend, I'll see you later. She'll be crying in the fucking pillow at the end of the night because I'll be dead. Maybe.
Well, I hope you don't get stabbed. I'll say that. I'll go on the record. I hope you don't get stabbed. But I did enjoy. I did enjoy that. And
you all got me because I hate watching really good Counter-Strike matches. You know what? I really wanted to sit up and watch a match that would be really terrible because it's clearly all my predictions are based on what I want. Right? I only say things that I want to happen. Right?
Oh, I know you didn't want the ship final. Obviously, that'd be retarded. But
that's the way people reacted. People have a religious zeal, right? Where because, I mean, they can't admit this. They just say what they want to happen. So every single match, I believe this underdog team could do it. And then when I say, well, no, it's very unlikely they would. Like for example, oh, look, dickhead, what you thought Virtus Pro would beat Quantum Bellator Fire? What, the team that had even lost to shit teams on the map that they allowed to come through? Yes, logically, I had the only opinion that made any fucking sense that they would lose that game. If you say that they would not lose that game, you didn't tap into what they were doing or know them personally and know they had extra practice or sit in the room where they came up with the tactic. You're just a fucking moron who threw a dart at a wall and it just so happened that you accidentally hit a bullseye. You didn't even aim to hit a bullseye.
I mean, the prediction thing's stupid anyway. That's been done to death. But what I wanted to talk about, because obviously picking up the pace, was the fucking, like, I have no idea how it was as sick a final as it was, but it was the sickest final of all time. Like, definitely at a major. Probably one of the best finals we've had in CSGO. Do you agree, or?
In terms of it being very good, yeah, it was very, very good. In terms of, like, why it happened, though, I think it's almost inarguable. I think you have to say, first of all, let's look at that. If we had to count down, okay, let's say this was like a fucking ESPN feature. Top 10 reasons why Cloud9 won that final. Mm-hmm. Number one, well, no, maybe not number one, because number one would obviously have to be like someone like Skadoodle playing way above the level he normally does. Like that would probably be number one. But like top three on the list would be the player in the final who is considered the best player on those two teams had a terrible final.
Yeah, he did. We're talking about Nico, right? He was pretty non-existent on the first two maps, no doubt about it. It was interesting, actually. I got to get a beer with Carrigan after the final. He seemed to be like one of the guys who, wasn't taking the loss too hard. Said it, it's just one of those things.
The thing, Rich, this is where discussion again can't happen in this community, because since everyone else uses one factor to determine every opinion, whereas I use multivariate approach, I try to take as many factors as I can into consideration, and there's never one factor that affects it anyway. One factor affects this, which has a knock-on when compounded with another factor. Sometimes there's a factor going in the opposite direction that's lessening that. So people will say, if you say that, oh, Nico did really bad, right? So you're just saying Cloud9 didn't deserve to win. No, I'm not saying that, Kathy Newman. Actually, that's not in any way what I can imply. Well, I did it state what's almost a fact. I mean, it's technically an opinion, but it's almost a fact in that particular sense. So the point I'm making here is, if you have a scenario where, like, okay, let's say the fucking Cavaliers make the NBA Finals again, and LeBron literally averages 15 points a game less than he normally does. Like, you're not in any way taking away the victory from the other team by saying, well, that's a factor that allowed them to win the way they did, because the best player on both teams played much, much worse than he normally does. It's a pretty big factor.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was like, I talked to Carrigan, his perspective on it was that it wasn't a choke or anything. It was more like the play style, the calls that were getting made were just all sort of being read by Cloud9. So like Nico would go and do a Nico thing, but they expected the Nico thing, and he kind of would get caught out, and it kept happening and happening. And it, like, for the first two maps at least, he just couldn't find his groove. I'm I think the term choking is always like really overplayed, but I definitely do agree that if you're a star player,
mate.
No, if you're a star player and one of the best in the world,
who said I choked. Never met one.
No, that's true. Well, Device did actually.
Yeah, he did after 2 years. Like he had to literally choke something like 6 majors, and then I finally got him to break through. And you know why he finally admitted it? He admitted it after he actually tried going and talking to a sports psychologist and doing certain exercises. And guess what? When he noticed he didn't choke as much, he was like, fuck, it was all mental after all.
Imagine that, right?
Brilliant.
So I don't know, but I do think it's fair to criticize. Like, if you're the player who was statistically going into that final, the number 1 player at the tournament, a player who's ranked number 2 in the world, for some people is actually the number 1 player in the world.
Legitimate opinion.
Yeah. If you then get to a final and you're playing an underdog opponent and you underperform, I do think it's fair for the community to criticize you for that. And I think that's a staple of sports. And hopefully Nico's the kind of character that can sort of mire himself in the criticism and metabolize it in a way that enables him to get better, because he definitely is the kind of player that should be carrying finals against underdog opponents. This was on a plate for FaZe. I mean, look,
this should have been the final where he just cruised to an MVP, mate.
Yeah, totally. For the whole tournament, and it just didn't work out like that. Very, very strange. Let's talk about the final overall in general, though. I mean, first of all, just staying on FaZe as a subject, Guardian, fuck his life, man. Like, I can't even begin to imagine how awful he feels now. Like 3 finals where they're the favorites in each of them, and 3 losses, despite him playing well. He played unbelievably well in 2 of them and was injured in a 3rd, and still gave it the old college try and played better than some of his teammates, despite having a fucking wrecked arm. Like, what has that guy got to fucking do to win a major? And I saw him tweet today saying, FaZe will be my last team. So it's like, you know, I don't know if he's already starting to think maybe like it's not going to happen for me and I'm going to retire. I hope he doesn't go down that route, because he fucking played out of his skin again. Definitely didn't deserve to be on the losing team. Like, we had already said, if FaZe come back and win this, like, Guardian's the MVP. He kept him in it so many times. I think
he's the MVP no matter what, mate. This is a perfect example of how utterly worthless all MVP discussions are. Right, so you're telling me Skadoodle was more valuable than Guardian? Doesn't make any sense.
No, it does.
Not least because Guardian, remember, this isn't like an example. This sometimes happens where a team gets beaten heavily, but there's a guy does amazing on the worst team. He was literally 1 round from winning the tournament. What? So not winning that round made him less valuable? It's just a stupid argument, isn't it? Like, that's why it happens every time. Why do people make individual awards team awards? Yeah, because you know what? This is the ultimate example of all time. I
hate this too. I bring it up all the time.
Like, first of all, it is not finals MVP. We are not in the NBA. So it is impossible for Skadoodle to be the MVP of this tournament, because he was in no sense the MVP of the rest of the fucking tournament. So that's outrageous in itself. Now, if you want to go to someone else in Cloud9, maybe Tariq. I think that might not be a bad one. Automatic, if you add in some of the playoff series, I think overall he kind of got up there. The problem is, Cloud9, this is one of the I'd give this as the test case example of how stupid it is to give the MVP to someone from the winning team. Because actually, if you go and look at how Cloud9 did it in all the playoff series, they had no superstar, and they had like 4 players in most series all contribute really heavily in their own roles, but not dominate the game. Meanwhile, someone like Nico, Guardian, obviously Nico dropped off in the finals, you ignore that. Nico and Guardian over the tournament were just fucking blitzing it. They were just so good all the time, superstar player. And as I say, Guardian gave what essentially was a championship winning performance, just happened to lose. Why? Because someone else was fucking dying all the time. It wasn't even to do with him. It's not like he just cooled off and lost the game. His best teammate was literally just fucking losing rounds all over the place. And then his in-game leader's making bad calls. It just doesn't make sense to make an individual award team-based like this.
Yeah, and just to be clear, our award at the event was just for the final.
Okay.
So people can say whether that's a stupid idea or not, but the way we looked at it was there was going to be, you know, and it's clearly stated that's what it was. It wasn't misleading. It was MVP of the final. But the way we looked at it was like to have to sort of pick it out in real time with all variables and, and it could theoretically even be someone from like someone who wasn't in the final. So you would have the trophy lift, the trophy award, and then you would bring out somebody who would have to stay there an extra day. So there's a logistical concern there as well. But overall, I thought Skadoodle definitely warranted it for the final, but not for the tournament for Cloud9. He was very ordinary until the final, and then across 3 maps pulled out his career best form. Like literally the best I've ever seen him play in any tournament.
So that's another problem with MVP awards, like especially in the modern day. This is the second thing people have done to individual awards. Individual awards also generally are to congratulate the best individual. So here's the other way people have completely abused that concept. What they do is they use the logic that if the worst player plays well, that since you expect the best player to play well, suddenly somehow the worst player's performance exceeds the best player's performance. It's not supposed to be a relative award like that. It's supposed to be who the best performer was. So it doesn't, like, here's the problem with I'll give you the great example right now. Skadoodle versus Guardian, another perfect example. What was Guardian doing with his kills? He was doing amazing kills, amazing holds, amazing entries, winning clutch rounds. What was Skadoodle doing with his kills? Generally, he was getting one extra kill, usually like medium range when someone comes onto a site that normally he wouldn't get. Not some outrageous shot, not some outrageous kill, doing a good job, won a couple of clutches, even then not like amazing godlike clutches. No one right now could remember a single like highlight clutch he won. They were normal clutches. He won a 1v1 where he positioned properly, or he came in when his teammate came in. So even if they were the same number of kills, and I don't even know that they were, it would be very close, I'm sure. I don't think his was as big a contribution and didn't have the same value to his team as they did elsewhere. Because, for example, as I just pointed out, since it was such a team effort from Cloud9, well, guess what? Skadoodle could have done exactly what he just did, and if Stewie 2K just gets 3 less kills in a couple of rounds, boom, no MVP for Skadoodle. That doesn't make sense to me. Why would the player's play be worth more or less, but not based on anything different happening to what he did? That doesn't make any sense to me. It's the same reason why, like the only way I could think of to give you an objective example of how terrible this is, it would be like if we actually started deciding that, like, in sports like football, where they have the same in hockey, where there's a scorer's award. Person who scores the most goals, scores the most points, wins an award. Imagine if we just started valuing that the same way. Well, I'm going to give it to this guy who actually scored half as many points, but he usually doesn't score many points, so maybe he's the best scorer. You know what I mean? It would be silly, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and look, I don't know. I agree with the sentiment. Like, for me, it would have been fine to give it to Guardian, for example. I wish we could give the MVP to someone from the losing team more often in esports. But there does seem to be a prevailing sentiment among fans that how can he be the MVP? Didn't even win the tournament, which obviously is an absurd premise. But I don't know. I felt Skadoodle definitely would have been close with Guardian.
Yeah,
for
it's
me.
close.
And I had no like hesitation when I had to give my vote over the comms. I said Skadoodle definitely. Like, I'm trying to think, like, he had a wicked fucking clutch on Inferno where it was like a no scope. He was boxed in. He threw down a smoke. He like fucking got up on the box, made a mad no scope and stuff. Like, made a 1v2 clutch. There was like a 1v3 with a fucking AK, I think, that he did. Like, he had some pretty good rounds with the rifle. Like, he just made some sick plays. And maybe it was like the sheer shock because I'd never seen him do that before. I will admit maybe that's a factor. Sometimes when you see somebody who you don't associate with that level make such a drastic step up at such a crucial time, in your mind that need for narrative can maybe obscure. I still think he was a very valid pick for MVP.
Put it this way. First of all, he was valid for the MVP. Like, he actually, his overall level was good. But what's funny is, this is where there should be 2 awards. I would do 2 awards. There's one award, MVP. Like, that just goes to Guardian in this particular case. I'd have another award, X Factor. And that goes to whoever was the one who was the pivotal factor. So the key element there is Guardian was more valuable, but Skadoodle was the X Factor.
Yeah, quite possibly. But let's just talk about Cloud9. I mean, I even said it on the broadcast. I never thought as long as I fucking lived, I would see an NA team win an event, like a major, like, sure, an event here or there. And obviously when we made our bet about which team was going to turn out better, Team Liquid or Cloud9, I was like, fuck, this could be risky. Like, it's only going to be marginally more my way when I placed that bet. Like, I knew it was still, like a 55, 60% in my favor, in my mind, obviously not by any measurement of reality. But when I said that, I don't then expect them to go on and win a fucking major. You know what I mean? Like, that's beyond my wildest dreams. And I predicted them to beat G2, obviously did that on the podcast. Thought maybe that might be as far as it got, but fucking hell, like I had no idea they could win it, and they just looked amazing. Like their style of play is, they were doing to FaZe what FaZe should have been doing to them. They did it to G2, what G2 should be doing to them. Just fearless, aggressive play, taking key control of areas of the map. Stewie playing off every fucking advanced spawn he got, pushing through smokes, going for fucking knives in must-win rounds, not when a round's already won. Like, just doing it because in his mind, it's the optimal play at that moment. Tarek and Automatic, just amazing throughout. It was just insane how good they all were.
That's actually exactly also what made this final nothing like the 3 times they played in those other tournaments where FaZe just 2-0'd them, and 5 out of 6 times they didn't even get double digits. What happened is, the reason why FaZe was a nightmare matchup for Cloud9 is because Cloud9, I'll give them credit, it's in this sense they didn't do anything different. It's not that they now got the confidence because of the rest of the tournament to make these players. They make those players versus FaZe in all the other series as well. But the difference is, in the other series, right, when FaZe gets like someone pushes through a smoke and kills them, or someone has like a really ballsy peak, FaZe just does it right back to them and has the confidence that, we're better players. Who gives a fuck? And so what happens is, in those games, if I'm Carrigan, I'm loving it, because Carrigan doesn't want to go super like insanely tactical and control every element anyway. So what's mad is, in those games, he just tries to keep the tempo right. And as long as the tempo's right, like a Cloud9 player peeks in, kills one of you, you trade right back to him, you push on the site, and then you use the fact that because he's died and you're a CT, for example, now he's put his team at a disadvantage because you've got less numbers and your team's more spread out. And so suddenly they advance on the site. So what's mad is he's using your instincts against you in that particular sense. The difference was, in this final right here, once we got out of map 1, what would happen was the Cloud9 player would push through, make a play, and then the FaZe players would be like hesitant and would be like, fuck, I'll pull back. They didn't go forwards and sort of like, in like a fucking boxing match where you get hit, so you hit the other guy while he's got an opening. No, they would just like cover it up,
Yeah, and FaZe were 9-0 on maps against Cloud9. Like this Cloud9 going into it. Yeah. But this is what I mean. It was like, I am going to steal this, by the way, if you're okay with it. Like the Miracle of Massachusetts.
It's good, yeah, you said.
I think that's a wicked fucking terminology. I'll definitely acknowledge where it came from.
It's all right.
It'll get lost in the annals of time, like tears in the rain. But obviously, we'll know it was you. The Miracle of Massachusetts. Definitely going to use that. But I said it on the broadcast as well. I think there was definitely some elements at play that got to FaZe. Like, FaZe proved themselves to be very human here. Nico aside, Guardian obviously being in yet another final. What if it doesn't go my way? What if I'm destined to never win a big one? What if I am that fucking player? What if I am like the fucking Tony? Sean Gayes is the Tony Romo on the desk. Guardian's like the fucking Tony Romo, on the fucking server. What if I said Romo?
Thing is, Tony Romo, because here's the thing. It's when you said it, I thought about saying this before, so I'll say it now. When you were saying Sean Gayes is like the Tony Romo, I was going to say, it's weird that, because do you remember when Tony Romo got with Jessica Simpson and his play just sort of went off kilter for a couple of years? Anyway, no connection.
Never hold back from straight fire, never. But fucking, obviously, I'm sure it was in Guardian's head. Olaf Meister, I guess, always kind of feels a little bit in the shadow of some of his former Fnatic teammates, because he came in at, not the end, but obviously, he was with peak Fnatic, but they got 3 majors because they got that lucky one over at NIP way back when, and he didn't, right? And like, he should be up there, he's like, so maybe it's in his mind as well. I definitely, and Carrigan knows that people say, you're not great tactically. You're super lucky with the people you get to play with. And he needs to win all the big tournaments to kind of validate it. Even if he does, people will probably still say, yeah, well, your team carried you. And incidentally, I do think he made some really bad reads and calls overall tactically. They were kept in the final by some absolute miracle plays. Like I say, Guardian. Even that one when Nico, who'd been quiet on Inferno, when he somehow pushed through a smoke, went past 4 of them without them seeing him, and managed to catch the guy with the bomb coming up T stairs.
Sure.
Like how you can't legislate for shit like that. So I don't know. I mean, in your mind, is this Cloud9 stepping up massively, and they're going to go on to be one of the world's best teams? Because their CV of all the teams they beat, the scalps they took en route to this is a miracle run as well, having to beat SK, Stralis, G2, Gambit as well, if I remember rightly. Did they play Gambit in a best of 1?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. Sorry, I made that up. Don't have it in front of me.
It was Stralis they played.
Stralis, yeah, I said that. So they played all these top teams to like fucking get there, and then they beat FaZe in the final. If they consistently do this in 2018, there's nothing stopping them being like a top 3 team. There's nothing stopping it being like SK, FaZe, Cloud9, because Danish CS fell off a fucking cliff.
The problem with that is, part of the reason I would also say this would be in the top 10 reasons why the final went that way is because none of the other matches that these teams played were in the final of a major. You know the reason why that whole choking thing's also a waste of fucking time, because we have no control group. You might, as he said, Guardians played in a lot of major finals. 3. Great. So we've had 3 games to judge him off, and yeah, that's what we have to judge him off. So what's mad is, obviously, you turn up and you have a bad game. Might not even be choking sometimes. That just might have been your scheduled bad game, and that happens to be the day that is the final of the major. But you are now judged forever on the basis of that. Oh, you're not clutch. You are clutch. It's like it goes either way. So one of the worst factors in whenever you're predicting majors is you never know which rookie it'll be that has the fucking letdown. And I have to say that's a factor right there that happened for Cloud9, which I think is almost inexplicable. That a team that's almost entirely rookies to the playoffs of the major, none of them choked. Like, it's not like, a couple of them did, none of them choked. That almost never happens. You can go back and look in history. There's always the rookie that has the problem, or most times, in fact, this is one of the reasons I said right after the major why actually I don't put it too much on Nico. Definitely I judge his performance in isolation and go, this isn't close to good enough for what I expect from you. You are a main reason your team lost. But then I also do look, wait a minute, first ever time in the major playoffs, 20 years old. Yeah, guess what? You get a couple of those. You actually get kind of not a pass, but you get consideration that it's not the end of this doesn't define you as a shit player or a choker. No, but in that scenario, you definitely didn't come to play. Now, that never happened for Cloud9, so that is amazing in itself. But I definitely think that the major final weighed way more heavily on the minds of FaZe than it did on the minds of the Cloud9 guys.
Yeah, I think that's undoubtedly true. But
in fact, I even think I could see a world in which, because they got so comprehensively battered in every other FaZe series, the fact it was the major final just made them like, fuck it, we've already seen the worst. Just do what we do, mate. Let's just see what happens, right? You have no fear at that point in time. You already had the beat down 3 times in a row.
Yeah, and I think what's amazing about it, and is like, it just shows what an anomaly it fucking is, right? Is like they're 14-11 down against favourites. It's done.
It was 15-11.
15, sorry.
It was 15-11.
You're out.
And in fact, a couple rounds earlier, it was like 14-9, and Cloud9 did that force spy where they had 2 ZZs, UMP, and 2 AKs. Now, a CT on Inferno, that is the end of the game. You have lost the game. And even if you win that round, you need some really big moments going on, bearing in mind that the other
team, you can't have the utility.
You can't ever let your economy die. Exactly. So you're in such a bad scenario there. Now, listen. In that scenario, here's what people don't understand again, because they are idiots. That is not saying Cloud9 should win the tournament. What I'm actually saying to you there is they did an even better job than if it had been a full gun round and they had won, because they took a round that should have been impossible to win and they won it. So actually, in a sense, I'm saying that's even better, but it doesn't change the fact that they had everything stacked against them.
No, I mean, it was mad. And this is what I mean. The mental fortitude for these young guys, it's crazy. Same thing that happened in the overtime. It's look, I've got to say this, because we've I've wrecked Valens on the podcast before, saying he's not a leader of men. He just kind of sits in the back, all quiet.
Oh, mate, you're gonna love this. Did you know this detail? Yeah, right, when they played against SK Gaming, did you know that Cloud9 banned Nuke?
Yeah, I saw that. That was so.
And do you know the reason why?
What had he heard?
No, Valens fucked up the piece of paper.
No way.
Yeah, he's a professional coach.
Is that real?
Yeah, he even admitted it.
Because I couldn't believe it when it came through. What I thought must have happened.
He had 2 scenarios planned as to whether they, because remember that quarterfinal between SK and Fnatic took place on the same day. So he had 2 vetoes planned. Is it Fnatic? Is it SK? If it's Fnatic, we're going to ban Nuke because we heard behind the scenes they might play it a bit. We know SK doesn't play it. He got the wrong sheet of paper.
Oh my God. Yeah, you're right. It's there on HLTV. Fuck.
Pretty good.
Well, that is bad. Because when it came through,
it's like you had one job, motherfucker.
Right, when it came
and that
through,
is not being a fucking budget cosplay version of I'm a Pet.
Right, when it came through, I was like
being the before picture for I'm a Pet's fucking miracle diet. I keep it real. You know how it is, mate.
You're real as fuck tonight, mate. Too real. Right. So when I saw it come through, I thought, oh, someone must have fucking got to him, like, and told him, oh, SK prepared secret nuke for you or something. I thought it was some. Wow.
Which, by the way, allowed SK to then ban Train. Yes, it did. Yeah, no, absolutely, Richard. Remember,
how did it work out?
Remember, the maps were Mirage and Cobblestone, and by the way, a lot of people said Cloud9's good on Cobblestone. They haven't played it in a while, mate. Like that could have been a 2-0. That could have fucked them. That wasn't, because obviously they were outrageously good on Mirage. Didn't matter, but that could have been a classic gaff.
Yeah, that's horrific. Well, I was going to say, like, I thought he did a good job over the course of the tournament. He might not be a leader of men, but now he's always got it that he's won a major as a coach. But fucking hell, I don't know now after hearing that.
Here's the thing.
I had a whole speech prepared.
Yeah. I will say this. This is where I can maybe rework it in so he gets credit again. Right? I would go ahead and assume that he had something to do with why, when they played these Inferno games that they played against SK and against FaZe, they did have this very interesting approach to how they held on the CT side, which is whenever they were against a proper gun round and the opponent goes really slow, right? That is where the entire dynamic of Inferno, forever in every version of Counter-Strike, is the reason you go really slow and seemingly waste utility to get to an area of the map is because once you have that area, you can now force the CTs to rotate. Now, yes, there's obviously a game of chess there, so sometimes the CT doesn't rotate, he pushes behind you, looks for, there's a whole game of chess there between both in-game leaders, the CT and the T in-game leader. But what happens is, normally, there's certain pushes in certain area you've given up that has to force a rotation, because if you don't, the gamble's just too big consistently not to do it. But if you go and watch this final, on the CT side, on that third map, Cloud9 consistently just does not bite on any fakes. They literally are willing to say, if you actually have 4 guys coming towards B now off this one smoke that you're throwing now, congrats, you get it as a 4v2, and you probably take the site and win the round. But guess what? If it's a fake and you're going back to A, you're going to find the 3 people that we need on A in this site, and you're going to think there's going to be 2 there, and it's going to fuck your game plan up. And now that is not, as far as I can tell, like an in-game read in the moment. That looks to me like they studied demos and that they actually had a sense for like when they could do that. And then they had the nerves and the balls in a massive major final to take that fucking massive gamble. So fair play, it worked out. And I think that was a massive factor as to why they won the final.
Yeah. So just a couple of final thoughts. Tarek, do we give much credence to him as an in-game leader? Because it is a weird setup. Like, I still don't necessarily see him as a traditional IGL in the sense that he's coming with a playbook and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. I think Valens gives him like tendencies and tactics and ideas, and then like he disseminates them, and then some of the other players, if you listen to their comms, they'll say, I'm going to go do this, and they'll make that. There's a little bit of like a democracy going on in the calls, but he played fucking amazing.
Oh, yeah. First of all, forget as an in-game leader, just individually he played really well. He had a fantastic game. One of the things people always overlook with him is that, I mean, here's the thing. Me and Moses used to rib him about this a couple of years ago because he actually really did believe he could be like a primary AWPer. Now, I don't know that he could be a proper primary AWPer in like a top 3 team, but he definitely got a lot better over the years with the AWP. And he is like a mad all-around talent now. Like, he can do everything in the game. And what I think actually has really fit him in this Cloud9 team is that he actually seems to have a similar calling style and mind for how to play the game, which is based on a lot of individual players, as Stewie 2K did. So I think actually they pair up really well mentally in that sense. And so I think it probably is a very good mixture of like simple calls mixed with let's just work off what people want to do. And I actually think that puts Cloud9 at their very best. I think they would be a team where if you did bring in Zeus and you brought in some in-game leader who wanted to run set strats in every sense, I could see a world in which that might be worse for this Cloud9 team. I think it probably works best to play this style. It seems to fit most of the players in the squad now.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, it truly is phenomenal what's going on with Cloud9. I'm super happy for them. I know they've been grinding a long time. Young team, very exciting prospect. And I hope they can go somewhere. I hope they're not a one-hit wonder like a Gambit, who were a bit disappointing at this
I think they probably are.
Yeah, well, I thought you might say that. But
I mean, there's no reason not to. They only played one match that would say otherwise.
I don't know. I mean, okay, it's hard to judge with so many best of ones being amongst the results on the route to the major final, and I'll definitely reserve judgment. But I'm excited to see them at the next tournament. I think they can build on this. Like, if they're a team that's driven by confidence and sort of, as you say, just having Billy Big Balls, then winning a fucking major over FaZe is only going to give you even bigger balls and make you more confident. So I'll reserve judgment next tournament, though. If they win that or have a deep run or go to a final, I might be ready to start making some pretty wild declarations about how good they're going to be. Anyway, we've got about 15 minutes left. So let's do the big story, Duncan. I want to offer you my services as somebody that has gone through many a libel case, a defamation case in the past. I'm happy to represent you, Duncan, for free.
Okay.
In the upcoming KNG versus Duncan Torrent Shields lawsuit, which I'm sure you've been made aware of, and I can tell that you're a little bit, probably terrified at the prospect of losing your house and all your belongings to pay him for things you never said.
Imagine saying something like that publicly and then you being the person who claims that everyone persecutes you. Imagine that. Imagine saying that you're going to sue someone for making jokes not about you, not to you, and in no way defamatory, while you say that I am a homosexual and that is a bad thing, and then somehow I'm going to be the one sued for slander.
Pretty wild, isn't it?
Fucking moron. You know the sad thing, Richard? He's a perfect example of where you can actually have the best intentions. I'm talking about me in this case, and it actually can backfire on you. Because you know what? One thing I regret actually in terms of a piece of content is if I could go back and delete like what I said in that video where he actually got into trouble, or I can't remember which one it was. It was the video that was about what happened at DreamHack Montreal, where I actually tried to give I tried to give an impassioned plea that maybe he meant something different, maybe he didn't even mean he wanted to kill him. Turned out he did. That was all not the case. In this very specific incident, he actually did entirely mean all those things. It wasn't a cultural misunderstanding. It wasn't that it was someone where he just didn't have all the information. It was none of those things. And in fact, every interaction I've had with the guy since has only shown that no, he is everything he appears to be and worse. So for example, since he's going to go ahead and publicly say these things, that he's going to sue me and that I'm a racist, etc., I will go ahead and as a result in this scenario, normally I don't ever reveal things said privately, but when people actually force your hand by lying about you, sometimes you have to correct the record. As soon as he tweeted that tweet, which was essentially a homophobic joke, which, by the way, in his culture might not be considered as much, but that's because he comes from a culture which in that very particular sense is fucked and needs to get its act together. So when he tweeted that, I privately tweeted him because I noticed he had DMs open and said, I'm totally fine with us bantering and you can talk as much shit to me, but don't say things like that because you have to understand people from North America and Europe aren't going to understand it the same way and it will possibly get you into trouble and no one wants your career to get into trouble. So just keep it as banter. Even then he was just replying like, why you persecute me, man? Like, why you do this to me? It's like, I haven't done any of this, have I? So I'm out. I'm off, mate.
It is crazy. I somehow I got drawn into it again for just saying, Nade Shot when he picked these guys up did say, I'm going to hold them to the
Oh,
highest
no, by the way,
standard.
Richard, remember, it's only Brazilians that are persecuted by everyone. But me and you aren't even allowed to give opinions just on our own Twitter's accounts. We're not allowed to. That's not persecution at all, right?
Yeah, I thought it was really weird because all I said was it was something like I tweeted Nade Shot when he picked this guy up said he was going to hold him to the highest standard. I wonder what will come of this. Well, Nade Shot did as good as his word, held them to the highest standard, and removed him from the team. Which, by the way, I also remember you saying after the fact, it's whack he got removed,
which is obviously never referenced.
No,
even by this cunt.
Yeah, you're never going to win with him, mate. Like,
I don't care anymore, mate. That's the great thing about people like him. So understand this if you are KNG or anyone like you. I don't give a fuck about you. Like, I will represent what I think is my moral stance. So, for example, back when I didn't know Coldzera as a person, he actually said something that was considered a homophobic slur on Twitter. Now, even though he and others in his team had disparaged me and been quite rude to me on certain occasions, I defended him because I thought the moral that I was trying to defend was defendable, and I would do it again, even if it was someone I didn't like and someone who slammed me.
I remember the same thing. I remember that exact incident, and I tweeted to him a reply saying, "You want to delete this as soon as possible." Yeah.
So the point I'm making here, though, is like any player who thinks that because they are offended, that will be what determines whether or not I will tweet or give my opinion. You better get a fucking number and get in line, mate, because you're not even at the front of the line on this one. And you are so off base and entitled. It's a fucking joke. And guess what? If you can't handle tweets, get off Twitter, delete your account. Because what's hilarious is this particular incident is a man who imagines himself to be a tough guy. So we're talking about a tough guy who threatens people's lives online, then tries to beat them up over tweets, yet is so sensitive that a tweet not even addressing him demands, apparently, a homophobic response as a joke. What a child.
It was unbelievable.
Mate.
No. And this is the thing. It's like, what? It'd be tragic because here's the difference between me and you on this particular issue. I'm 100% in the just fuck this idiot camp. Fuck him forever. Because he was given a fucking red carpet here, right? Like, it's unreal. You completely fucked over not just one organization, but you and your two little goony pals basically laid waste to the major prior to it.
Oh, you wrecked 3 teams.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you wrecked Bolts and Steel, who had made it.
Sorry, you wrecked 4 teams. You wrecked Mortals, Team Liquid, SK Gaming, and 100 Thieves.
Yeah, right. So they all had to suffer that, right? Like, which is completely unfair. I won't even get a Peacemaker in Tyler. He was having a go at me. We haven't got time, right? But those 3 guys, their desire to play with each other has fucked up 4 teams and a good team owner in the space and people who don't deserve it. People who don't deserve to be fucked over. Do the likes of fucking Elige and all those guys deserve to not be able to play with a player they only went out and got because he was only available and it was a fucking fire sale and he had to do it and Stan had gone and they went, you know, like all of these seismic repercussions that impacted on it. And ultimately, I'll say this, Nade Shot, the Call of Duty guy, whatever you want to say about Nade Shot and his intentions, he's ponied up, he's put his fucking money where his mouth is, he's injecting a huge amount of cash into esports holistically, and Counter-Strike, obviously, and he has took a gamble. And he has took a gamble on you in the same way that you might say ESL took a gamble when they rehired Duncan, or E-League took a gamble when they hired me. Now, here's what you don't do when people take those gambles on you. When you are a toxic asset in the eyes of many, and someone goes to fucking bat for you. Even to the point where Nade Shot made a video and put his name and his reputation on the fucking line to give you a paycheck. Right? What do? You go out and you completely shit all over that.
Oh, and by the way, let me just jump in there. Every single fan or community member who said, fuck 100 Thieves when KNG was fired. Nah, fuck you. We don't need you in Counter-Strike. You are a fucking rat. Like, the idea that 100 Thieves is to blame for this now. Oh. What, are they just supposed to suffer every iniquity while someone continues to fuck up again and again and again? No, They should. I think they shouldn't even have picked this team up, but they did. And then this guy, not only, we don't know if it was him, but someone's fucked up the paperwork for going to the tournament. You've already cost them the major that they basically paid above the odds to get you for. Then after that, you don't just not tweet and continue to collect your massive salary while playing no motherfucking tournaments for months. So basically, you don't even do your job as a professional player. You don't just do that. You then go out, not only get into Twitter beef, which in itself's a bad look, but then you do so with homophobic remarks. And then after that, even when you are fired, do not ever apologize to the person you said the remark to, because you say in your opening line, this is not a retraction letter. You do not feel that you did anything wrong or said anything that was wrong. And guess what? I guarantee right now, they still think that they were the fucking ones persecuting. I bet they include 100 Thieves in their persecution as well.
Oh, no doubt.
It's a disgrace, isn't it?
It's so crazy. And I've said this, like, it's looking real bad for 100 Thieves now. They've had to bail out of 2 tournaments. They're being linked with Phelps, apparently. Even if that goes through, you don't know what fucking Henny and Lucas are going to do. Do they want to fucking still play without KNG? They felt so strongly about it once. They left the team once before. The whole thing's a fucking nightmare for everybody involved. And honestly, let's just say there's a world where Henny and Lucas put their foot down and say, nah, Phelps isn't going to cut it. Or let's say Phelps comes in and the vibe's not quite there and it's not the fucking Villa party mix or whatever the fuck they call themselves. And they don't get the results and they don't play. Because I was excited to see them. They were my dark horse pick for the major. Never even fucking made it there. And now they're not going to another 2 tournaments. What if Nadeshot just says, you know what, fuck this, CS ain't for me. We already got fucking NA orgs on the fence about Counter-Strike saying we don't see where the profit potential is. Brilliant. You've just driven a fucking, your final full stop at the sentences. You've just driven a huge sponsor out of our game. I've literally never seen 3 more selfish pricks reap so much damage in esports. It's unbelievable how far and wide-reaching the implications of their selfishness and lack of professionalism is. It's ridiculous.
And by the way, what's sad about this entire incident, this very one you're talking about with KNG and me, is it just showed that this isn't 1 or 2 people in the Brazilian community. It's not just that KNG is a total idiot. You know how many people in the Brazilian community who are known figures, their take on this whole thing, Richard, was like, maybe he shouldn't have said exactly that, but he was entirely justified and provoked entirely. And how dare this person make a joke? Like, these are like big people in their scene. So it just shows that this is a problem their scene has, mate.
And like I say, I never go down the fucking role model route because I lean more towards Charles Barkley's philosophy on that. But if you're an aspiring Brazilian pro, so far there has been very few. KNG is the first, we suspect, actual person to be penalised for some pretty outrageous behaviour to come out at the top level of their scene. So hopefully it sets a fucking trend because yes. I don't like hysteria and outrage culture and gunning for people's jobs and livelihoods. But there's just no way on God's green earth you can make an argument to say KNG did not deserve for the wrecked, because he fucking did. He's content to be.
He's even a liar, mate. Like, let's just go ahead and say this as a fact right now.
Well, that's why you're not getting sued, because the shit he's saying you said doesn't fucking exist.
Oh, no, he's even a liar about his tweet. You know what he then claimed, both in his Facebook post and his follow-up tweet? That the premise of the joke was not homophobic. Remember, the joke is that am I sober or have I just made love to my boyfriend? Like, somehow making love to my boyfriend is why I'm in this mood where I've made this tweet, right?
Yeah.
Right. If that's a positive thing to make love to my boyfriend, why would you? What's the joke? How's that a burn? Yeah. Like, what have you just made love to your wife who's beautiful and you have a fantastic relationship with? Loser. Wouldn't work as a joke, would it? It only works because, at least in theory, I am explicitly known to be a heterosexual person, and presumably, and I know this is a fact, in his culture, unfortunately, people who consider themselves very masculine men look down upon homosexuality, and therefore that is an insult to imply that the person is homosexual. So that was the premise of the joke. Now, he didn't just say afterwards, oh, fuck, I fucked up, shouldn't have said that, apologise. No, he not only defends it, but now claims it wasn't even homophobic. homophobic. No, the premise, you are just a liar at this point in time. Like, that was exactly your intent to convey to me. This isn't a scenario of like, oh, the intention got lost here, you know. No, that's literally what the intention was. You conveyed it correctly, my friend. Your English was perfect.
So we'll wrap that up. There was one comparison I wanted to slip in. I know this guy called Noise, and he tweeted at me, and it's just a perfect comparison. He said KNG is the Nile Ranger of Counter-Strike. And I don't know if you follow football, Duncan, but Nile Ranger is a youth footballer who came through for Newcastle. Now, in 2007, he was sentenced to in a young offenders institution after being involved in a robbery in London, and he was given like 3 months in this young offenders institute. And after that, he was brought to Newcastle United. He was identified as having a good, youth prospect, so they brought him into Newcastle United, and he was touted as being potentially a really good player for Newcastle. In his time at Newcastle, I'll just go through it. He was questioned by police in 2011 for posing with a replica gun in a photograph. Then in 2011, he was arrested for suspicion of assault. Also in 2011, he was arrested and charged for being drunk and disorderly. In 2012, he was fined by the FA for making homophobic comments on Twitter. Also in 2012, there was a call to a disturbance, and Ranger was arrested and charged with criminal damage. It was later dropped because he had somebody come out and vouch for him and say that they did it. Then in 2013, he was arrested on suspicion of rape, and then he was cleared of that charge. And then in 2013, he was charged with common assault successfully. So this team that had took this gamble on him, by the way, with all of these legal problems, in the 4 years he was at Newcastle United, he only made 51 appearances and scored 2 goals, and he's a fucking striker. He just threw away every chance. Now he's like at fucking Southend United or something. Still in trouble with the law. That's KNG in a nutshell. Could have been a contender. Completely fucked it up. Right, anyway. We haven't got time to talk about VP and Taz. We'll get to that next episode. There's a couple other bits and pieces, breaking news, North, all of that. We'll definitely cover it. Maybe we'll expedite the next episode so we can get onto that in a timely fashion. I'll check with Duncan's schedule for that. But I will ask the last question from one of our $100 patrons, close out. It's a fairly straightforward one, Duncan. You'll like it. It's Anders themed. Is Cloud9 winning the major the final proof we are indeed living in a simulation?
I don't think it was as crazy as that. Like, here's the thing. It was in as much as, like, there's no way you could have predicted it would happen. And it was amazing in that sense. To me, the problem with that one is, like, it's surely by that logic, it's like a Moses simulation or something like that, which, by the way, in itself is kind of hilarious because obviously Moses wasn't cast in that game. So it's only all the games that he casts that they lose and break his heart. So if anything, I don't think even he'd pick that, right?
Here's what I did like. There was somebody on Reddit who seriously believes that majors are scripted by Valve. And he went into all this detail. I made a note of it, but it's on my fucking laptop. But if you want to see how easily amused people are, Rich,
there was a thread on Reddit where someone said, you know what, someone actually predicted the final exactly. And I thought, fucking hell. I clicked it. You know what they did?
Just random scores, wasn't it?
Just said the scores, yeah.
Yeah. Which obviously, on a long enough time scale.
Stupid as fucking.
Yeah.
Like, here's the thing.
Didn't even name the maps.
Yeah, I'm not saying he had to literally predict up, but if someone had just said something interesting, like, I've seen something about the way that you sometimes run a double up, set up on CT side Inferno, I think that'll be a key factor if it gets played. That would actually be something. This was just nothing. And this was like a Reddit thread that people were like, fucking hell. It's like, you for real?
Yeah, he's not the fucking time traveler, is he? But yeah, like I said, I did see some guys.
For years. Imagine if he comes back from the time. Oh, Cloud9 wins the final. Oh, how did they do it? 16-11. Well, yeah, but in what way though? I won't say more.
You'll see.
It's so stupid, isn't it?
All
right, John Tito, get the fuck out.
So there you go. That was the post-major episode of By the Numbers. As I've said, maybe we'll kick off the next episode because yes, there is stuff going on. rumors of Taz being out of the team. We've got fucking obviously North imploding, it seems, at the moment, which I know you'll definitely have some viewpoints about. Seems to be in line with what we were talking about. Actually, they did send Cajun B out, which I said might be a fix, and they did bring that Mertz in, which you said was a potential fix. So interesting. But anyway, we'll get into that in another episode. All that remains to be done is to go over all of our patrons that support the show. And that is, of course, $100 patrons: Mateus Pietkowski, Chris N. Wynn, Jerky's Minion, and Detlef Insomniac, who I did have the pleasure of meeting in person at the major. So shout out to Detlef. Sorry we couldn't get that beer. It was pretty fucking hectic on the last night. It was like a push me, pull you. Our $50 patrons: Funky Boy, Sard Sawar, Patrim Thorenson, COWO, Carl Oscar Garcia Firm, Humongous Watt, Daniel Plamanov Yodnov, Naz Tradamus, Marcus Kiyunpa, Keith Miller, Benekagi Assassin, and William Southern. So, like I say, we'll try and schedule something in the next few days. But to everybody who tuned in tonight, obviously appreciate it. Great to be back from the major. You can expect a steady stream of content. Thanks for supporting By the Numbers, and we will see you on the next episode. Take care.